Hello everyone and welcome back to cedh Budget Bible. Today I'm going to be going over my Rashmi Eternity's Crafter control list for cedh. So yeah, let's get right into it. For creatures, we don't really have a lot. It's a control deck. Just got, few mana rampers right here. Just Arbor Elf, Elvish Mystic, Finehorn Elves, Landworn Elves, Birds of Paradise, standard stuff. And then we have Baral, because he lets you loot whenever you counter something. And he makes instants and sorceries cost 1 less to cast. And he's only 2 mana, so that's a pretty good deal. We got Collector Oof, because this deck does not use a lot of artifacts. And it just shuts them off, so it's better for control. And then we have Tender Shoot Dryad. Oh my god. Tender Shoot Dryad, which reads at the beginning of each upkeep, not just yours, so on your opponent's, create a 1/1 Sapperling creature token. Sapperlings you control get +2/+2 as long as you have the City's Blessing. And you get the City's Blessing by controlling 10 or more permanents. So this can start pumping out 12 power each turn cycle, and that is ridiculous, especially if you want to just beat down on opponents. So this is just here, mainly to close out the game, but you have other finishers. Like Thassa's Oracle is part of your combo. I shouldn't have to explain that. It combos with Enter the Infinite. Once you just get enough mana, push it to the late game. Then we have Wavebreak Hippocamp, one of my favorite cards. I really like this card, and it reads, whenever you cast your first spell during each opponent's turn, draw a card. So counter anything, draw a card, bounce anything, draw a card. Just cast anything on an opponent's turn, you just draw a card. Super good, especially in other control decks. Now, for sorceries, we have Enter the Infinite, which was for the Thassa's Oracle. That's just a combo right there. And then we have Gitaxian Probe, Merchant Scroll. This is in almost every cedh deck that includes blue. I really shouldn't have to explain that. Got Merchant Scroll to search your whatchamacallit. This is not an instant, yeah. You can just search for a counter spell, search for what you need. And then you got Ponder, Preordain, shouldn't really have to explain those two, just good card draw. Regrowth to just get back a counter spell, and then Seasons Past to get back every single counter spell you have. I really like this card in the deck. It just puts everything in your graveyard right back into your hand. Super good card in this deck. And then for instance, we got Arcane Denial, just 2 mana counter spell, draws your opponent 2 cards, you draw a card. Autumn's Veil to, prevent your stuff from being countered when you don't want it to be countered. Beast Within just destroys anything for 3 mana. Pretty good card. Brainstorm's there for card draw. Chain of Vapor, just here for good cheap interaction. Bounces anything. Counterspell, again, good cheap interaction. Delay and Dispel, just counter stuff. Good interaction. Airtie's Meddling. Now, this card is definitely going to be in the blue underrated video. And it reads, when target spell is successfully cast, put X delay counters on it. X cannot be 0. So, this card is basically the same thing as, where is it? Yeah, delay. But how delay is a fixed amount, like it's 3 time counters for the suspend. Airtie's Meddling is basically just that card, but with X. So you can pay, like, this card works better on anything non-creature, because it comes off of this. It comes off of suspend on their upkeep, and then you have an additional chance to counter it again. But you could just delay it that many more turns by paying more into X. So if this card can hit any counterspell for 2 mana, so I see it as pretty good. And we got Flusterstorm, just great 1 mana counterspell. Force of Vigor to destroy 2 target artifacts or enchantments. Just pretty good card to do that for free. Good for control. And we have Growth Spiral for ramp, and it draws you a card, and you can play it at instant speed. So it's a pretty good card. And it's the only card like itself in the deck. Like, there aren't many other cards that are like this in the deck. And then we've got Hercule's Recall. Just bounces all your opponent's artifacts. Especially because I play in like a very heavily populated artifact meta. A whole lot of Teferis, whole lot of Urzas. So this card personally works for me, but you could swap this card out for something that maybe works for your meta more. Into the Royal just bounces anything, and if you kick it, get to draw a card. Mana Leak, counter spells. Card is not really that great in the late game because they have more mana, but this card can be pretty good in the early game. Mental Misstep, it's in every blue deck. Counters those turn 1 plays, super good. Miscast, it's just a better, what's that card? Spell Pierce. It's just that, but better. It counters any instant and sorcery unless they pay 3, and it's 1 cheaper than Mana Leak. But it only hits instants and sorceries, but this card is pretty good, and also going to be in the blue underrated video, by the way. Misdirection, another underrated blue card. And it reads, you may exile a blue card from your hand rather than pay Misdirection's mana cost. Change the target of target spell with a single target. So basically you get to counter a counter spell for free, or change the target of like a removal spell, bounce spell. I don't know, this card's pretty good, and it's only like $1 or so, so I think this card's pretty underrated. Next, Muddle the Mixture. Counters instants and sorceries, transmute it for what you need. In most blue decks, card is pretty good. Natural State, most artifacts and enchantments are going to be 3 or less. This can just remove them for a single green at instant speed. Nature's Claim does the same thing, but they gain 4 life and it has no CMC restriction. Got Negate, counters target non-creature spell. Just anything non-creature, gone. Most of the spells in cEDH, going to be non-creature. Pongify, Rapid Hybridization, these are the exact same card, but with different tokens. They just blow up a creature for 1 blue mana at instant speed. Give them a 3/3. We got Reality Shift. Exile target creature's controller manifests the top card of his library. Just, they get a 2/2 and it's 1 more mana. Just, blue doesn't really have a lot of ways of removing creatures. Neither does green, so that's why this card is here. Then Reap. This is an interesting card. Return any number of target cards from your graveyard to your hand, but you can't choose more than the number of black permanents target opponent controls. So this is also an instant, so you could just return a free counterspell to your hand at instant speed. And yeah, you could just return whatever you want from your graveyard to your hand as long as they control. Like, most opponents in cEDH are going to be playing black because black has all the best tutors, demonic consultation. Black has a lot of good stuff, so Reap is definitely a good card, and especially because it can just return your cheap interaction if you're, you know, gassing out, and then Rashmi can just help you draw cards. So can a bunch of other cards that you can play. And yeah, Snap, just return target creature to its owner's hand, untap 2 lands, just a free creature bounce. Snapback, another free creature bounce. This is definitely going to be in the blue underrated video. You may remove a blue card from your hand rather than pay Snapback's mana cost. Return target creature to its owner's hand. So basically, you just remove any blue spell and it's a free creature bounce. There's no mana necessary for this card. It just bounced the creature instant speed for 0 mana. So yeah, I think this card is underrated. Sees almost no play, and I think this card's really good. Next, we got Spell Snare. Most interaction in cEDH, like even in this deck, is 2 mana. And a bunch of tutors are going to be 2 mana. There's a bunch of good cards at 2 mana, like Dockside Extortionist, Underworld Breach, and this can counter them at instant speed for just a single blue mana. So I think this card is definitely good. I don't know if it'll make an appearance in the underrated blue video, but maybe. Stifle, counter target triggered or activated ability. Just cast this after they cast their Thassa's Oracle and they lose the next turn. So that's why this card is in this deck. This card is super good, and this does see a fair amount of play. So I don't think it'll be making the blue underrated list, but you know, definitely is a good card. Belongs in this deck. Then we got Submerge. If an opponent controls a forest and you control an island, you may play Submerge without paying its mana cost. Put target creature on top of your opponent's library. So it's basically a just free snapback, but an opponent has to control a forest, and it puts it on top of their library, not even back to their hand. So you basically just like poof their next draw. This card is pretty good, not underrated at all. This card sees a fair amount of play. We got Swan Song. This is in almost every blue deck. Counter target enchantment, instant, or sorcery. They get a 2/2. You already know what it does. Yep, belongs in the deck. Next card. This card is definitely going to be in the underrated blue video. It is kind of expensive. However, I've never seen it in a game at all, and it reads, counter target activated or triggered ability. If a permanent's ability is countered this way, activated abilities of that permanent can't be played this turn, and it has split second. So Trick Bind, 1, can't be countered. 2, Stifle doesn't say that they can't just like activate an ability of something again. And counter target activated or triggered ability. So this does not say it can't be mana abilities. I think Stifle does. Counter target activated or triggered ability. If it's a permanent ability counters this way, activated abilities that permanent. Oh wait, no, it actually can't hit mana abilities. So yeah, but this card can additionally, like if they're going for an infinite mana combo, just cast this on Urza's ability, and unless I can win at instant speed, they're gonna have to wait a whole nother turn cycle, and now your opponents have more time, and you do too, to interact with what they're doing, you know, dismantle their combo. So this card is super good, and I've never seen it played, and it will definitely be in the blue underrated video. Next card. Unsubstantiate. Return target spell or creature to its owner's hand. Just bounces a spell or a creature, 2 mana, instant speed. It's in a lot of decks, sees enough play, definitely a good card. Artifacts, you just got the basics, Arcane Signet, Belwar Stone, you know, just 2 mana ramp artifacts. We got Grafdigger's Cage. You don't really use the graveyard in this deck at all, other than like a few cards like Reap and Seasons Past, but you can get by on not having those with a Grafdigger's Cage. It's gonna hurt your opponents more than it's gonna hurt you. We got Simic Signet, Soul Ring, and Talisman of Curiosity. These cards are all just ramp artifacts. You're just here for the purpose of ramping. And then for enchantments, we have Back to Basics, which obviously limits your opponent's mana. Super good card in blue. Sees a lot of play again. We got Compost. Now, this card is... I really like this card, but I don't think it's good enough to see play. That's why it wasn't in the green underrated video, but I did decide to put it in this deck. Let me read it off. It's a 2-mana enchantment. Whenever a black card is put into your opponent's graveyards, you may draw a card. Whenever they cast a black spell or you destroy a black permanent, you get to draw a card. This card is super good, especially for 2 mana. Even if it just draws you like 3 or 4 cards, I'd say it's honestly worth it, because they're going to be, you know, less likely to cast their black spells if they know that you draw a card when it resolves. And then we have Counterbalance, which can just randomly counter a card for some reason. This card is actually super good, and I think it deserves to see more play. It may or may not be in the blue underrated video. Haven't decided yet, but it reads, whenever an opponent plays a spell, you may reveal the top card of your library. If you do, counter that spell if it has the same converted mana cost as the real card. A lot of spells in cEDH have similar CMCs, like they narrow around the 1, 2, and 3 mana mark, and some 4 and 5, but mostly they narrow around that, and that's what most of your cards narrow around. So this can just, you know, counter the odd spell when it's, or prevent your opponents from casting that spell because they know it'll be countered. So yeah, that's why this is in the deck. Just, you know, counters a spell when you're not even expecting it. We've got Energy Flux. I really love this card. This is definitely going to be in the blue underrated video, and this is one of my favorite cards in Magic. And it reads, during each player's upkeep, destroy all artifacts that player controls. The player may pay an additional 2 for each artifact he or she wishes to prevent energy flux from destroying. So if they can't pay 2 for each artifact they control, their artifacts go bye-bye. And you also cannot tap the artifact itself to pay for the cost. This is a really old card. It's super cheap, surprisingly, and it has a ton of artworks, and they cannot use the artifact to pay for its ability. So that's why I really like this card. It just gets rid of all artifacts pretty much in one go. They're gonna be heavily taxed on their mana if they do want to keep their artifacts, which is why I really like this card. Deals with artifact decks really well. Moving on, we got Ground Seal. Ground Seal enters the battlefield, draw a card. Cards in graveyards can't be the target of spells or abilities. If you already saw the underrated green video, you already know what's good. Card just seals off graveyards, super good. You don't use the graveyard, so why not stop your opponents from using the graveyard? Next, we got Mystic Remora. It's in every blue deck. Shouldn't need explanation. Moving on, we got Root Maze. Artifacts and lands come into play tapped. Just prevents turbo ad nauseum or super fast starts, especially because it's only a single mana. It just prevents your opponents from ramping out super far ahead, so you can actually control them. So that's why that's in the deck. Next, we got Utopia Sprawl. Enchants a forest, you pick a color, taps for an extra of that color. Got Wild Growth, which is the same card, but it's limited to a green, so it only adds an additional green, but still a good card. Then we've got Verity Circle. Whenever a creature an opponent controls becomes tapped, if it isn't being declared as an attacker, you may draw a card. So whenever they tap a Mana Door, or they tap anything which is an activated ability of a creature by tapping it, other than attacking, you get to draw a card. So it can just draw you a lot of cards if you're in a heavy green meta, or I don't even know what they're playing, but you know, maybe this card is the right card for you. Because to make this deck a budget deck, like, oftentimes Rhystic Study is a little bit too expensive, so I just go for Verity Circle. And I don't know if this card is going to make it into the blue underrated list. I don't know if it's good enough. For the lands, we got Bark Channel Pathway, not even out yet, but it's the flip land, the MDFC land from Kaldheim. Got Flooded Grove, just filter land, 10 forests, 1 hinterland harbor, 17 islands, and a Yavimaya coast. That's really it. It's really all you need. And Rashmi can help you achieve your game plan. And she reads, whenever you cast your first spell each turn, reveal the top card of your library. You may cast it without paying its mana cost. If it's a spell with lesser converted mana cost, if you don't cast it, put it into your hand. So, say you get into a counter war, right? Your opponent plays, I don't know, their ad nauseum. You hit them with a negate, and then you reveal the top card of your library. And it's a dispel. You can just cast that, and you can just get a ton of free value. And it also lets you draw the card if you don't cast it, but your opponents do know what's coming up, so they could be prepared for that. But Rashmi just really helps your draw go game plan. And this deck is currently sitting at $201. So it's a good budget option. I really like this deck, and I might actually build it in paper and test it out on some cedh Discord servers for the channel. So if you guys really want to see that, drop a like and drop a comment if you guys want to see that. So this has been Josh with cedh Budget Bible, and I'm signing out.